I'm Elaine. We're just traveling. Ooh. All right, good. So welcome, Seer and Higher Self. So connecting how these lives are happening is that we're connecting with your higher self. And I just had to turn off my phone. Claiming technology and source's name, claiming the Wi-Fi and the internet and source's name. Oh, I just noticed that my computer got unplugged. Okay, I just got confirmation that the sound is good. So if there's ever any sound that you can't hear me, I'm just gonna let them know. Thank you. Okay. Welcome, welcome, welcome. All right, so we already have somebody in the chat. Helen. Hi, Elaine. Nice to see you. Nice to see you too, Helen. I'm gonna send you some hearts and 100% send you some hearts back. Um, let's see as we're getting settled here. So a lot has been happening, I think, with lots of people, and they've been doing their decrees and then giving me feedback on kind of how, not even feedback, but just kind of their experience of how the decrees have been happening for them. And I find that the decrees are a full clearing. They're not only a full clearing, but they're a full protection. So we're going right to the root cause, to the very first incarnation. And each decree, there's different words that come in that to revoke in the decrees. And then the decrees have a name. And so when I do the decrees privately with people, there's based on what's going on in their lives, and then when what's happening, the decrees actually come through organically, and they do have a name, and they've had really amazing names actually. Um, okay, so with the hair, it is actually the hair does connect to the nervous system, and it clears from the nervous system. And we can kind of know that because if anybody's ever had, I don't know, for women, if we ever have like a really bad breakup or divorce, we always change our hair, usually. I mean, not always, but if somebody's really been decimated in a relationship, they will change their hair, and the hair that the way it looked in that relationship is over. And it's because it really marks that relationship is over. And so the nervous system is kind of like the antenna for the whole body system. And then in this work, we're always working, how's the body doing? The body is the compass. The body lets us know, okay, well, how are we feeling? What is in, when I did the womb healing decree, I kept thinking, there's something in my stomach. There's like an interference in my stomach. And that's kind of how it came about. It was just, for me, that's how it came about. But actually, a client, it came through in a dream for her. So she did it, I think, weeks before I did the womb healing decree, and then wrote it and then published it for Saturday, the 11th of July, 2026. And for me, what my dream showed me, so this is how I would view it as my higher self, because it was a dream just before I woke up, so I remembered it. And it was a whole bunch of people. It was like my hotel room, but it was like an executive hotel room. So it was really big. And there was a whole bunch of people in my hotel room. And then even like five or six people had a card game going, and then other people were like sitting on the couch listening to music. And I was like, and I came in and I was like, what's everybody doing? Like, what are you doing in my hotel room? Like literally, like what is going on? And they're like, well, some so and so let me in, or so and so, and that, and they named all these people of who like let them in, and they were all like different people. And I was like, yeah, you can't be in here. Like none of you can be in here. Like you all have to go. And they were like, yeah, but we're comfortable. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. Like it's my hotel room. Like you have to go. And then I was like, calling the hotel manager, and I was like, calling for a cleaning service, and I was just like, what happened? And they're like, well, we don't know, because we're trying to get, we're trying to track it, and this person let that person in, and then that person let a different person in, and there were so many different people. So it wasn't just like one person. It wasn't just one experience, it was multiple experiences that led to the womb healing decree, but that meant there was multiple beings or entities or whatever you want to call them, installations that were in there that were not meant to be in there. And it was only because at one point I looked at my stomach and I thought, wow, like my stomach looks like I'm 8 months pregnant. And I was like, normally in my life, my stomach actually, if I gain weight, it's like on my hips, but I never gained on my stomach. Even when I had a baby, within 2 weeks, the baby belly had gone away on its own. It's not normally where I carry weight. So that had been my question. What's going on with my stomach? What is going on? And then finally, the womb healing decree kind of came about. So, and there was like all this interference that needed to have a full release. But it's almost like maybe in the past, the interference was maybe small, and so I couldn't see it. And then there was no kind of, my body wasn't showing like a physical um response to what was actually kind of hidden in the womb area, which is like really the whole biome, the whole stomach area. So, yeah, it was really interesting how it all came through, but it was a very low vibration, like they were playing cards. They were like, people were smoking, people were like hanging on the couch, listening to like music I would never listen to. It was like very low vibration. And it was like, to me, it felt like an infiltration and a low vibration. And then my body was basically giving me the sign that, there's something going on in the womb area and the stomach area, and to look into it basically. And then as soon as I had that dream, then I knew, okay, it's time, this is the womb healing decree. And then it's kind of like, for me, if it's happening to me or it's happening to my clients, then it's happening to many. And it's like an interference that is happening. It's an installation and interference that happens to many. So the client that the womb decree came from, she remembered as a teenager, she didn't know what they were called at that point, but they were the praying mantis, the insectoids. So they can do installations from like 7D, not to freak anybody out, but remember, we're like an emanated source being, a heart-based being. So we have a lot more consciousness, right? We have a lot more authority than we have been told, Um, we're always told, empaths and sensitives, oh, you're too sensitive, or oh, you're not seeing things correctly. There's always people around us trying to tell us that, we're not seeing things as they are, or it's not a big deal, or, and that's the dark triad. The dark triad are the archons, and their whole job is to administer a low vibration, to keep you into fear, to keep you into scarcity, to keep you in anger or sadness or whatever emotion feels uh like safe, you know? Yeah. So anyways, the hotel, they all got kicked out. The cleaning crew had to come in. And I can feel the difference. I can feel there's like a relief. There was like a tension. It's like it emits like the installations and the frequencies that are off. They they're they're so low vibrational that they even like they they create this constant agitation to the nervous system. And once they're removed, then you actually feel, oh, you know, oh, that I was like agitated for a long time. So, yeah. So that's the womb healing decree. And I feel like it will help many people and not just women, but men too, because men come through a womb. So, and then maybe they have been in a female body in other time spaces. So in other dimensions, in other timelines. And I know for me in one timeline, it was like in ancient Greek with the philosophers, and I had to be in a male body. I've mostly been, if I've been on Earth, I've mostly been in a female body. But at that time, if I wanted to be a part of the philosophers and the kind of awakening of that consciousness and documenting that consciousness in ancient Greece with the philosophers, I had to be in a male body because you wouldn't have been able to be in that circle if you weren't in a male body because it was only men. So so if I was, and I've seen it with clients too, where say in this timeline they're in a male body, but they've mostly been in a male body, but there were a couple times or sometimes they've had to be in a female body depending on what they're meant to do in that timeline. So so it, with the womb healing decree, I feel like it will really bring a completion and a full release. So I feel the client that brought about the womb healing decree, what she saw was actually the praying mantis putting like a cage over her womb. And so the goal was for her not to match with her divine counterpart and then not to have children. And so for it to be completely blocked. And so, I mean, this is energy work, right? So it's not, but we know that there's lots of times where people are trying to get pregnant and they don't get pregnant and there's no reason for it. They've already had another child. So we did one healing with Mary, one energy clearing, and the person, they already had a baby and they were trying to have a second baby, but they couldn't get pregnant. It had been about a couple years, I guess. They had been trying, and but yet there was no reason why they couldn't get pregnant. And so we looked into it, and it was basically just a womb healing. So that was probably a couple years ago when we did that. So I can see the womb healing decree had been coming through slowly, like over the last couple of years. It's been kind of like gathering momentum and and a really important decree to clear. And then when we did that energy clearing, and then Mary from Quantum Connectors, she said, well, how long can she expect, like to get pregnant or to have another baby? And then they were like, now, she could have a baby now. And she literally, and then, Mary said, well, when can that happen? And then they basically, the higher self said, yeah, like 9 months. And so basically within the time of, like having that energy clearing, she got pregnant and then the baby was born in 9 months. So it was exactly, the timing was like spot on. But her womb needed a healing and a clearing. So all healing is self-healing, right? Because we have to choose and decide. And I know it can seem really stressful. Um, and that's why, um, you know, it's almost like, we're like a last resort, like with this work, because it's so, out there. Maybe it's not so out there anymore, but the results come through, like the results have happened. Like these are real energy clearings. Like our higher self needs to know, what we want released, what we want changed, what we want answers to. And, because it's free will, but it's really a real transmutation and transformation. Like, and especially with the womb, has so much interference happens with the womb. And, to really bring in that pure, divine love and that self-healing and the energy clearing, um, there is like a surrendering that has to happen. Whew, which is always the hardest, for me. Especially when you come from a trauma background, it's actually not easy to let go. It's not easy to surrender. It's not easy to even admit that you're overwhelmed and that you you don't know what to do. Like you don't know what else to do, because I think people that come from a trauma background work so hard. They work so hard on their healing. They work so hard on finding answers and trying to understand what happened in their childhood, what happened to the people that are around them, like what makes people the way they are. Like for me, it made me a really good detective. I'm able to kind of track things. Um, and also, um, I think it surprises people because maybe I don't look like that. Maybe I just look so like nice and I don't know, like clueless, but I think people are always very, very surprised. But I'm always really paying attention to the small details. And then I have a really good memory and then I kind of put all the pieces together and it can really surprise some people, but I'm not doing it by myself. I'm doing it, with my higher self. So just going to look at the chat. Welcome, Sunija. Hi, Helen, Elaine, and everyone else present. Hi, Sunija. I'm going to give you some hearts. And Helen says, hi, hey, Sunija. Nice. We all met here on YouTube Live on the Seer and Herself. I don't think Sunija and Helen know each other, but they know each other through the YouTube Lives and doing the decrees. So I'm so grateful to both of you because you ask really good questions and you've done the decrees and then you've given feedback on how they've been going. And Sunita left a message about after doing the womb healing decree and then just kind of getting clobbered like a psychic attack in her dreams. And I just want you to know, Sunija, I had a psychic attack last night. So I get psychic attacks all the time. But the difference, because I was wondering, how to talk to you about it, but the difference is it's not that the psychic attacks stop because that's 3D. 3D is nothing but interference. 3D is nothing but installations. 3D is nothing but psychic attacks. But you remember that 3D is the horizontal, right? And with the decrees and with our higher self, we're connecting to the vertical, right? We're going into consciousness, into source consciousness. So source being at the way top, right? But then the heart-based consciousness is at 500 and say source is at 1000, right? So we are, and then say 3D is like the one percenters, So it's like anywhere from like 1 to 300 is 3D, maybe 250, maybe 200. And, if you're there at like 200, it's still like shame, guilt, fear. It's still a low frequency. You're still being constantly pulled into trauma, basically, and in trauma loops. Then that's 3D. 3D needs loosh, Loo, Loosh. It needs the frequency of pain, like what Eckhart Tolle calls the pain body. It needs 3D needs pain. I was so naive. I used to, because, from your higher self, I used to believe that love healed everything. It's like the Anunnaki in 4D do not care about love. They do not even care about human beings, source emanated beings. They think we're like bacteria. They think that we should be their slaves. They think that but I think it's because they're jealous. They came from source and they have removed themselves based on their decisions, choosing technology, choosing money, choosing systems over source, and they've gone further and further away from source that they, brag and call themselves the 1%ers. So um, but I think, ultimately they have like a parasite or something. They have lost their minds because they have created all of this, but they've created 3D Earth is in like an inversion. And so, but for me, the psychic attacks don't end. But what has changed, like as soon as the psychic attacks happened last night, I immediately opened my window and put my head out and I was like, who's here and what is going on? And I actually heard a different name than I've ever heard before. And it was the name that came through was Lucifer's Army. And I was like, what? And I immediately called in Yeshua. So Yeshua is a healer. So called in Yeshua, in that people call Jesus in the crucifixion timeline. And then I called in Anubis from the Egyptian expression timeline to clear and to clear out basically the space. I called in Archangel Michael, only source aligned. That's nice. A dragonfly just flew by the window. Cute. And then I called in Miriam. So Miriam, Mother Mary from the crucifixion timeline. So to call in protection, to call in clearing, and to call in healing. And I actually was physically soaking wet. That's how terrified, that's how overwhelmed I felt in that psychic attack. And so maybe and another, if I was at a different time in my life and I got soaking wet and I had that really bad dream, I would have just been like, my nervous system would have been like shaking and I would have been like really confused and I would have felt overwhelmed and my clothes would have been soaking wet and I would have said, oh, well, maybe it's just like a whatever perimenopause, menopause, or, it's like everything is blamed on that, you know? Um, and, but my body actually had a physical response and then did like an immediate physical clearing, like an expulsion. And water is a purifier. And so my body immediately, as soon as I called in for help, my body went into immediate purification. And that's how I see it. And but it was overwhelming. Like it was completely overwhelming. But I noticed it in the moment and I woke up. I woke myself up immediately. I got fresh air so that I was like with with the elements, with the wind, with the breeze, with the wind. And then the light outside, even though it was in the middle of the night. I don't know, Vancouver is never dark, it seems to me. It's never dark. It was literally in the middle of the night. And then I called in help right away. And that is actually like a high level of consciousness to, and you'll get there where you're going to be there in that moment and you're going to be out. Like, this is my space. This space is claimed in Source's name. Like, you are not allowed in this space or anywhere near my body. And that is the whole point of the decree is you're naming things and clearing things that are not yours and they are not meant to be inside your body. So um and then the It's kind of like I find that the characters, I call them, like they're like say you're in a movie and these are like they kind of behave like characters, right? Like they think they're like superheroes, but they're like the anti-heroes. They're all like Darth Vader, you know? Like they're all like the basically like wanting to bring everything to the lowest vibration. And they don't care about divine love. They don't care about source. They don't care about life. They don't care about consciousness. They care about the cage and administering the cage and keeping us, like down, our heads down and feeling defeated and feeling overwhelmed. And then, there's always people, in different timelines that have said no, that's not who we are. Like I'm a source emanated being. Like, you know, in the crucifixion timeline, we also had Krishna at the same timeline, that was awakening in another part of the world, right? So that sometimes they were in different parts of the world, but they were awakening consciousness, like Buddha was awakening consciousness. Yeshua was awakening consciousness. Miriam was awakening consciousness. Mary Magdalene was, awakening consciousness. But there's many that are not famous because they've been kind of erased. And so we've been, told about certain people, but there's been many, and they're erased. Like this new decree. Whew. Let's see, what was the one that I did yesterday that created all this? Oh, you guys are going to love this title. This one's called the Voodoo Doll Spells Decree. And I wrote it on Monday, and then I did it on Monday night, and and then the dream, of course, the psychic attack came after that decree, but it's a really powerful decree because it wasn't, we were told like, oh, this is just kind of like kids play or kind of like black magic, but it's like, wasn't taken very seriously. And my research, I found out that actually the Roman Empire made those dolls and then did a little write-up that went with the dolls. And so basically it was um like say you didn't say that there was somebody that wanted to marry you, but you didn't want to marry them. And so then they would get this, it's called a defixio, Defixio. Yeah, I have the decree here. So I wrote it, and then it's actually like they're quite long. Like there's a lot, to each decree, like there's a lot. And anyway, so this is it. This is the Voodoo Dolls Spells Decree. And so it's called a Roman binding curse. And so they would actually the way we imagine is the little doll, and it would have the name of the person, and then it would have these like spears through like the eyes, the throat, the hands would be bound, the feet would be bound. But they did these and they've like recovered like 1,500 of them, and they're like in the Louvre Museum. It's like it's not fantasy. Like, and these weren't like poor people and then in this little village creating these little like dolls. This was something that actually like sophisticated, wealthy people created because they weren't getting what they wanted. So say there was a woman that they wanted to fall in love with them, but the woman said no. Well, then they would make one of these dolls, so that she couldn't see anything but him, So anyways, I did that decree last night, and that's after that the psychic attack happened, but I was prepared. I knew um that it could create like it's almost like we don't have to be afraid, but it's kind of like they have a temper tantrum. So after you do a decree, I never tell people because some people just have such a huge release and they feel so amazing, but also what you're expelling out of your field can create like a temper tantrum for like, the material plane, for the archons, for the whatever little administrators, the dark triad. And so this one got their attention, but it got like a different person's attention. The Lucifer, that's what they actually calls themselves, Lucifer's army. That's actually what they call themselves. So I'm like gonna be putting them in the decree because now I see what they're, but they're all Lucifer's army is actually came from a high dimension. So actually the same dimension from Archangel Michael, so like 11D or above, so actually high vibration. And then their fall into the density, into the material plane, what they really focus on is sex, drugs, rock and roll, basically, movies, Hollywood, changing the music so that the music is at a low frequency, like an agitating frequency. And then the movies, you know, basically putting their propaganda or their, yeah, it's pretty much propaganda, putting, what they want out there. This is the way the world is, and then they put it in a movie. Um, but yeah, I got to meet them last night, so it's just like, oh my goodness. But like the thing is that with any attack, as soon as I call in for help, it's like zap, it's gone, it's over. And it is that consciousness in the moment. But it literally, it was like a snap and it was cleared out. So thank you, team. Okay, let's take a look at the chat. Okay, so Sinija says, oh, so sorry, Elaine. Thank you, Sinija. Sinija says, thank you for sharing. And then Sinija says, how can they bypass my verbal claiming space? Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, so because Sinija was upset about, because how can she have a psychic attack when she's claiming her home in Source's name? She's claiming her sleep in Source's name. She's setting an intention before she goes to bed. She's doing the decrees. She's salting the corners of her room. She has the plants. She has, the essential oils in the corners, spritzing and the salt. And so she's doing all of the right things. And the reason why they come through our sleep is because, in a way, we are compromised. That's why we do the decree with eyes open, and I don't do any hypnosis anymore. So in hypnosis, they can sneak in, and so I saw 100%. Yeah, thank you. And I'm guessing that's from Sinija. Thank you. So they they can sneak in hypnosis, because you're in that theta brain relaxed state, and then you're almost in the delta state where you could be falling asleep. But they come into our sleep because we're compromised in a way, because our body needs to fall asleep. Our body needs to rest. And so, like during the day, our eyes are open, our senses are open, we're hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting, our full faculty is on, our full system is on. So if something interferes with us, we go, hey, wait a minute, like, what was that? There was a couple times in the last few weeks where I would go down the stairs and I felt like I was going to trip. And then I kind of caught, and then I thought, oh, was I not paying attention? Was I like being clumsy or like what was going on? And so the first time it happened, I was like, oh, okay, I guess I better, pay attention. And then it happened a second time. And then I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Okay, I call in Archangel Michael, clear the stairs, clear the space. I'm calling in protection now. So that was the second time. And then it happened not on that stair, but a bit further down, and it was like the third time where I was holding things, and then I felt like I easily could have sprained my ankle. And but I was like, whoa, wait a minute. And so what I would say is that because I call in protection and claim my space in Source's name, maybe in another time, if I wasn't doing that, maybe I would have sprained my ankle. But this time it was more like they have a little temper tantrum. And so they can't fully take over my body because my body isn't embodied, but they can have like what I call a little temper tantrum. And so when that happened, I called in the team right away. So even though I called everybody in the morning, I did it again in the afternoon when that happened with the stairs. And then I was like, okay, like who's around me? There's some kind of interference around me. And then this bowl, it was like one of those big bowls, the Pyrex bowls, glass bowls, and I use it all the time. And it was in the cupboard in the kitchen, and it had two other glass bowls in it, and it smashed into a billion pieces. Not a billion, but and it smashed into so many pieces, and it wasn't just me that saw it. And they were like, this can't happen. It's not even possible for this to happen. Nothing touched it. It was in a cupboard. You know, it wasn't like hot or it wasn't too cold. It wasn't, there was no temperature problems, but it completely shattered. And to me, that's like a psychic attack, but them having a temper tantrum. But they can't really interfere with me, you know, but they can kind of have little moments of like temper tantrums, I call them, you know? And so, you know, maybe in another time, if say I was like younger or a different time, maybe I would have gotten like more spooked, but it was more like, no, like this is my space and you need to go, basically. And then I asked, you know, who was it or who created that temper tantrum and the ankle, and it was Yaldabaoth. So whatever. You know, like I just, to me, I see they don't see anything beyond 3D. And I know there is more than 3D because I love the heart space and I love connecting to source. And so I it's like to me, I see them as temper tantrums. But if you get kind of like spooked or you feel I don't know, like that it's not fair or or angry, like, you know, I could have been angry because, you know, the bowl smashed and it, you know, needed cleaning, but anyways, somebody else cleaned it. I was just like, I'm not cleaning that because it was like I was actually quite shocked, so it took me a minute or longer to get kind of collect myself, you know, so somebody else cleaned it, and it was good for them. It was good for them that they cleaned it. It was a nice thing to do, you know? Okay, so sending hearts. Okay, thank you. Okay, so let's take a look at the chat. Okay, there's more happening in the chat. Um, so that was the answer for that. So how can they, so Sunija asked, like, how can they bypass my verbal claiming of my space? Yeah, they're sneaky, you know, and I mean, we have to be fully like even, you know, Eckhart, who is that I spent 3 years meditating with, he still had, you know, like um the electrical panels, you know, burst or like the heating, it was like hot water heat, and it was like the, you know, it burst and there was like hot water spraying everywhere. So it's not that nothing happens to you. It's that inside you, you have this security and this attachment to your heart and to source, that when things happen in the 3D, because 3D is full of weirdness, that you are able to stabilize and then eventually get to the, like what Eckhart is like, is 0 point neutral, meaning he doesn't react. He's just like, okay, let's get somebody to fix it. Who do we need to call? But he didn't freak out. He wasn't like, and I was there when it happened, and he wasn't like, oh, the pipes burst and the floor is all wet and all my furniture is soaking wet and the guy came in to fix it and he's grumpy. You know, he was grumpy, the guy, but he just handled it. You know, he didn't panic. And but it wasn't fake, it was true. He really, you know, um he really stayed calm, and kind of like thought it was kind of funny, actually. Like, what can you do? If it bursts, if things happen, like, maybe was it a psychic attack? Maybe not. Maybe it was old and it needed to burst, but whatever, it burst. But the most important thing is, what is your reaction? How are you handling it? Like most of my day, I've no matter what happens, I feel pretty secure and stable, which that has not been true for most of my life. I was dysregulated and trauma bonded. So it's a big difference. So, okay. Thank you for that, Sunija. Good question. Okay, so Sunija's next question is, that's what I don't get, and where were the guides when I called them in? Yeah, so the thing is when fear trumps trust, and we can't really fake trust. We can't really fake faith. We can't really fake surrender. Like when I call them in, I let go. And I literally let go. Like I surrender. And because I know what it has cost me not to surrender. And it's actually been the hardest thing for me to become conscious of is surrendering. But consciousness is a process of surrendering. And so if they come in or if they don't come in, like I trust that they will come in. So even if my mind tells me nobody's coming, I'm like, I trust even if I don't trust. Even if my mind tells me nobody's here, I trust that they're here because I called them, because I have a relationship with them. And they've come in every time. And so sometimes now, I can feel them, I can hear them, but that hasn't been true my whole life. It hasn't been that crystal clear. I've had crystal clear dreams or I had crystal clear intuition, but now when I call, because I have a regular communication, with source, with my highest consciousness, meaning I am connecting with my heart and I'm connecting with my inner body. I'm not bypassing my body. So if anger comes up, I'm acknowledging the anger, and that's really holding your power, that even if no one else comes, so say last night, I have like Lucifer's army in my bedroom. I still took action. I opened the window. I got light in my eyes immediately. Like I took care of it first. And then I was like, okay, and now call in the team. Right. But I went into action. Right. Other times in my life, I would have been like in my bed, like terrified, like what happened, looking around my room, like what happened, right? That's normal. That's a normal response with an attack. But this time that didn't happen, you know? I immediately went into action and then I called everybody in, but I went into action, right? So it's me, my higher self, and source, really. And then any guides are extra. Even though they're wonderful guides and they're super loving, and I'm super grateful for them, they are really extra. It's me through the heart connecting to my higher self and source. And then the veil between me and my higher self, the veil between the higher self and you becomes almost like there is no veil. You're fully on in terms of like you're fully listening, you're fully um noticing. Yeah, so that's a really good question, Sunija, because yeah, it's like, where are they? And it's exactly, when we're first kind of like awakening and doing all of this clearing, like you've been doing a lot of work throughout your whole life, but we're kind of closing the loops with the decree. We're like closing recursion. We're like expelling things we didn't even know we needed to expel. Like I didn't even know really the significance of voodoo dolls until last week. So it's like we're learning this in the stages that we need to in terms of like releasing the interference. But it's practice, like so don't be hard on yourself and really like, even without your guides, you can do this. You can, like you can claim your space and just be like, yeah, you're not frightening me. Like this is my space. Like this is my space with source. Because 3D is like there's no boundaries in 3D. Like, have you met a narcissist that has boundaries? They have no boundaries. Sociopaths have no boundaries. Psychopaths have no boundaries. Like this, one of my professors when I was at university, this was a psychology class, and it was on like basically the dark triad. So it was on personality disorders. And so he said part of his PhD, he had to go to this hospital in Ontario, and it's basically like a prison. And so the people that are there are like never getting out because they're like psychopaths and sociopaths. And so they've created kind of, really horrific crimes. So he was, but he said his professors told him, don't read the charts, talk to the people, like meet them, face to face, have a chat with them, and, like, don't judge, basically. So he's like a young PhD guy getting his PhD. So he sat down with this young woman, and she was so beautiful, and she was so friendly, and she was so nice to talk to. And he thought, wow, like she's not supposed to be here. you know um I wonder, why is she here? So he had a nice chat with her, and then he looked at her chart, and she's a psychopath. So what made her diagnosed as a psychopath? She was a teenager, and she really fell in love with her best friend, and the dad of the best friend said you cannot be together because two women cannot be together, or two girls can't be together. It has to be a man and a woman. And so the father said no to their relationship. And then he told that, his daughter that she can't be friends with the woman that's presently in prison in this psychiatric hospital. And so the woman that's in the psychiatric hospital, she's like a teenager, and she thought, well, I'm going to go to a bar. And if I need to be a man in order to be with my friend, then I will just get a penis and then attach it, and then I'm a man, and then we can be together. And she did that exact thing. Like it's a real example. And that's how they think. They don't actually care about other people. Like she didn't think that maybe that guy did not want to be dismembered. She just thought, I need it. He has one. I'm going to take it from him. And that's like an example that is very 3D. 3D is I want this, so I will take it. I want to intrude, so I will intrude, right? And then our job is really to awaken our inner power, not power over others, but a self power. And the self power comes from the heart, because there can be interference with the heart, but nothing compared to the other energy centers, the other chakras. So it's a really, we're really anchoring power. Consciousness is an anchoring of your self power and that stance of being immovable, because there's, lots of trickiness that happens in 3D. Okay. Sunija says, I'm on the bus listening without earbuds, so I might not hear everything, but will listen to the recording. Okay, thanks, Sunija. Sunija says, I'm going to Nana's Bakery for spanakopita. Okay, great. I don't even know Nana's Bakery, so that's awesome. And then Sunija says, Psalm 91 from the Bible helps as protection. Yeah, exactly. Like now you're going to start really, you know, these situations happen because it's 3D. And it's hard because it feels personal, but it really is not personal. This is the way 3D is. 3D is a convoluted nightmare. It is layers of a nightmare. And then we have to decide, if we want to be part of the nightmare or awaken out of the nightmare. And then when we awaken out of the nightmare, it doesn't mean that we float around in a cloud and nothing happens to us. Like we're still in 3D bodies having to interact somewhat with the 3D plane, right? But our consciousness and stabilizing our consciousness to at least 500, it actually not just helps you, but it actually helps thousands. So Sinija says, yes, you're right. When they start pulling pranks, it's the best to pause and wait by focusing on your heart and higher self, and then continue to do what you wanted to do. Yeah, exactly. Like, our guides are great and only source aligned. Be very careful that guides are only source aligned. But really, what we need is our own heart and our own source connection. And then, really, then from our higher self, we have that full vision. Like we can see the overlay of everything. And then, and then really be able to stay in the vertical, which is source consciousness. But 3D wants us to just stay in the horizontal, just stay in the muck of 3D, where we're constantly terrified, where we're, we're constantly either angry or like agitated. Our nervous system is like we can't rest, we can't sleep, we can't rest, we can't. And our mind is, the ego mind it's bananas. Like it's the stuff it says is unbelievable, but with the decree, what happens is the ego gets ejected. And then it gets ejected more and more because it's an installation. So I got 100%. So it each decree, the ego gets kicked out and gets kicked out because you're claiming your space in source's name, you're claiming your body in source's name, you're claiming your experiences in source's name. And so the ego has to get sneakier, and they do have like what I call temper tantrums, because really what happened in my sleep, right? Like whatever came in, it was like terrifying, but I immediately responded. But my body, took the hit. Like I woke up soaking wet, like I needed to change my clothes. So, and that's just the body trying to help the nervous system then calm from what I call like a psychic attack. But I didn't even, I never used to think of them even as psychic attacks. But now I know I've seen it with my clients, I've seen it with myself, and now I know 3D, I feel like I know 3D really well. But really, what's happening now for you, Sanija, is, it's like in particular, because you're asking these questions, is you're really broadening your vision, right? Because they want to frighten you in your dreams and so that you give up. Oh, it's not working. Oh, I can't do it. Or I don't know, what is this even for? And it's like it's for a transformation. You're expelling what, you're revoking out of your system inferred consent, because 3D is all in. Oh, well, 5,000 years ago, the women said, oh, it's okay if you do voodoo dolls of us. But it wasn't just for women that they did voodoo dolls. It was always about money, 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 and property, right? So it was women, money, and property. And they found 1,500 of those voodoo dolls. It wasn't, these little weird people hiding in a basement. No, it was the Romans. It was sophisticated. So, um, whew. Yeah, so it's really getting empowered, like holding your power, and then staying with the big vision and staying vertical. And because 3D is always wanting us to get into the muck and go horizontal. And our job is heart connecting to our higher self and then to source consciousness in the vertical, and then going into the dimensions that are higher. All right, so let's take a look at the chat. So thank you. These are um, really good questions because this has come up a lot for me and for many people. Um, Helen says, that's a great question, Sunija. Thank you. Yeah, beautiful. And then Sunija says, last night I covered my mirror in my bedroom. Yes, actually, Sunija, that is a really good point. I do not have a mirror in my room. I took my mirror out of my room. Like I claim the mirrors, like the bathroom mirror, and there's a hallway mirror. I claim it, I touch it, and I claim it in Source's name. But I removed the mirrors out of my room. So that's really good, Sunija, that you covered your mirror. So mirrors and windows can be portals. So it's kind of like an unclaimed body. Sunija says, I think it's Sunija, but I got some 100%. So I claim, like I have a really big window in my bedroom, so I claim it in Source's name. And, but I took out my mirror. I don't have a mirror in my room. Yes, and lots of love. These are really good questions. Sunija says, you're welcome, Helen. And then Sunija says, this work should be taught in schools. Yeah, yeah, and maybe it will be, right? Maybe it will be one day. And it definitely needs to be. And it was at one point taught. Like the Gnostics taught it and then it got buried. So yeah, and I mean, for me, I just love like, your willingness, like both for Helen and Sunija, and like just your willingness to do the work, like it is work. It's work. Like Sunita just says this work should be taught in school. Yeah, like it is work. And it was taught. There was like, there was the mystery schools. There were the Essenes in different timelines. There were the Gnostics. That Mary Magdalene had her own school, even though she was erased. She was fully erased, but she had her own, kind of group that she taught. Um, yeah, so I mean, in this work, we're really calling our power back. We're calling our energy back, and we're revoking what isn't ours, but we're also reclaiming what is ours. And the Gnostics, they paid attention to, the like spaces, having the plants and the essential oils, like and the salt, especially the salt, because 3D is a frequency of interference, but some 3D are in bodies, like some Draco-reptilians or reptilians are in bodies, but some are not in bodies, right? So when they talk about the archons being around, like the archons is the Gnostic word for the reptilians. And so some of them are in bodies and some of them aren't in bodies. So that's kind of the way, 3D has like an energy interference. Because obviously if somebody walked into your bedroom, you would have been like, hey, like, or it wouldn't have been so hard for somebody to just walk into your room. But some of them, they're not in bodies, you know? And so then they'd always be like, trying to freak people out and say, oh, well, they're entities or oh, that only happens to some people that are possessed. And it's like, it's garbage. Like that all 3D is that type of interference. And then, it's just hold your vision. Like trust yourself, trust that I had this experience. It's like somebody could say to me, oh, well, you know, you just whatever, maybe you have the flu. It's like, I don't have the flu. It's like, well, why else would you get, like, why else would your clothes be soaking wet? Did you have a fever? It's like, I don't have a fever. I don't have the flu. It was my body responding to a psychic attack. And the psychic attack is basically people or entities that are not embodied, but they are around us. So, and actually that extra coat of shielding is really good because it's like through the heart, and you can call on, you ask your higher self for an extra coat of shielding, and then it's like a protective energy, but it works with your crystalline kind of plasma light around you, which is your light body. Another word for light body is diamond body. So it like holds the frequency, so you can have the protection, but also the focus and the navigation to kind of make your day-to-day kind of more easy. Yeah, maybe let's have some water. Actually, this is coconut water. It's not water. Okay, let's see where we're at with the chat. So really good responses and good questions. And just because you have a psychic attack, it doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. It's usually that you're doing something really right and they're having a bit of a temper tantrum. But, you can see that ultimately, like for me, they couldn't actually make me fall down the stairs, like they couldn't actually sprain my ankle. It was just like I lost my balance and then I thought, okay, time to get in my body. Like, what's going on here? But right away when something happens, I'm like, what's going on and who's around? And I'll get an answer. Like, I was shocked. I got an answer last night. I don't know why I'm so surprised because I get an answer every time, but I think I wasn't expecting it. I had so much experience with Yaldabaoth. Yaldabaoth was around for about a year, so I was like, basically the main, well, he thinks he's God of the 3D, but he doesn't actually think there's anything beyond 3D. Like they think they're source, basically. So, but anyways, so I was actually quite surprised that it was like new characters that were stepping in. So if you start, I don't know, I just see it, and I worked in film for a long time, so I guess I have like an imagination, but I start, for me, I see them more as characters. And then I don't take it, personally um, because that this is all they do on 3D. Like all only like on th in 3D is they only want to frighten you. And they want to frighten you so that you give up. And it's like, there's no way I am ever giving up on source. It's only source for me. I'm never giving up. Like, there's nothing they can do that would ever make me give up. No. And I also, they tell on themselves. Like when they have like, for Lucifer's army to show up, it's like, well, that's a really good decree. That's the voodoo doll's decree, that the Romans created that decree. A Roman binding curse, they called it. So they're just telling me it's actually a really good decree. Good job, Elaine. I hit the mark. We hit the mark, right? Because we do this work together. Okay, let's take a look at the chat. Um, Okay, so yeah, so Sunija knows to claim the windows and the doors because they're portals, so she knows. Yeah, see, like Sunija, you know all of this, so no wonder they're like, I'll send you lots of love because I know it can be really shocking and it's shocking with the nervous system. But the fast thing, like what I did is I immediately opened my window so that I could feel the wind, right? The elements, earth, like feel earth. Like you could have like a really bad nightmare and then just put your feet in the earth or on the earth or open a window or wash your hands or wash your face, like have the water, the water, the wind, the elements. Um, Obviously I love I really believe the elements help us, really clear 3D interference. And if we really start seeing it as interference, like how really have that willingness to kind of change the paradigm so we're not like afraid. Because we are afraid, but let's pretend we're not afraid because really they are like that voice in The Wizard of Oz where Toto went behind the curtain and it was this little old man and he, basically looks like Mr. Burns on Seinfeld, and he's like all terrified because, they work with smoke and mirrors, but Source is not like that. Source is crystal clear. Like you know where you stand with Source. It's an illumination. It's a transformation and it's a vibration. So, and you are your higher self. Like you have earned like the vibration and the frequency of your higher self. Like you've earned that in that is your highest dimension. And then what we're doing is we're clearing the interference so that you and your higher self are like one consciousness with source in a 3D body, but not living in the muck of 3D, not being in the horizontal. And if you do have to be in the horizontal, then, stay with your consciousness in the vertical. So that's kind of what we're working with. But this is, like, I don't know, for me, it's worth it. It's like, I don't know. It's totally worth it. Because you're gonna feel not only that your body's gonna feel really good, but you're gonna feel like you've got agency in your life. Like I'm gonna do this, or I want to create this, or I want to do this. So, all right, let's take a look at the chat. So thank you all for being here. Okay, let's look at the time. Okay, so we're past. All right, so Helen says, "Oh, I removed my mirror." Okay, Helen removed her mirror as well. And then Sinija said, "I knew someone that slept with crystals." Laugh out loud. Um, I do sleep with crystals. Are you laughing at me? I'm going to send lots of love to you, Helen and Sinija, and to everybody else that's watching. Thank you so much for being here. But I actually do sleep with these selenite discs. So, and it was interesting because they kind of move around. Um, this one, uh, there's two of them, and I usually put them like on my heart and my solar plexus. And like when I woke up when that kind of what I call the psychic invasion, they were like this in like on top of each other. They were like one on top of the other, like beside me. So I felt like they were kind of holding the field. So, um, but yeah, I feel like they were like stationed and they were like present, because I was like here and then they were here. And then, but the last time I saw them, they were on me. So then they were perfectly like, like this, like a little snowman. So, but yeah, I do actually sleep with crystals. I've been sleeping with crystals consistently for 3 years, actually. Yeah. And then Sunija says, "I feel like a warrior woman and I'm like fighting unseen forces." You are actually. Yeah, you are. You are. And you're also your vision is getting like crystal clear where you're seeing things as they are, not as you've been told. Because 3D, they're always telling us, oh, it's this way. There's no ether. They took the ether out of, the periodic table, like for chemistry, like they actually like changed it. Like in the last 100 years, there's been so much removal of information and so much distortion in the last 150 years, you know? So yeah, it's kind of like we're awakening to seeing things the way they are instead of how we're being told to see them. And then having our own experience. It's one thing for me to tell you, but it's another to actually experience, a psychic attack yourself in the middle of the night, right? And then Helen says that she sleeps with crystals too. Yeah, like I love them. Like they're like, they just create such a security. And they're here to help. And then our bodies are changing from carbon-based 3D to crystalline. So that is the light body, the crystalline body, the diamond body, the light body. But if, with the crystal, like you can see, like it has like all this, like it has like a crystalline grid and I feel like that's kind of like how we are, we have like a crystalline grid. So doing a bit of energy clearing, because we talked about a lot of stuff. A lot of stuff. Let's do some energy clearing. So, but I'm so proud of you both, like, Helen and Sunija, and thank you, whoever else is here that maybe doesn't want to pop into the chat, but you've done so much work and so much clearing, and just like these really authentic information's coming through, and yeah, so hopefully this will help. So call on that extra code of shielding and really connecting with that crystalline grid and the crystalline grid of New Earth, which can also be called the sacred garden. That's the intention of it. Where there's like, I don't know, shocking, but respect, love, fairness, justice. All right, let's look at the chat and we'll wrap up. Sunija says, laugh out loud, ladies. And then Sunija says, mine are beside the bed on the nightstand. Yeah, beautiful. So crystals. All right, so let's call in, let's say goodbye for now, and we'll see each other on Thursday. Thank you for being here. So let's bring in Sources Golden Light. And yeah, and I just really want to acknowledge like how willing you're both to try all of this, new information coming in and doing it. And like Sunija says, being a warrioress. I see 100% coming through. I'll send some love. Helen says, thank you so much. And Sunija says, great timing. So lots of love. So we'll call in Sources Golden Light, and we're asking for the deepest healing and clearing, right to the root cause, to the very first incarnation, connecting through our hearts to source consciousness, connecting to the vertical, and bringing in Sources Golden Light into all of ourselves. And then like clearing our auric field. And declaring this space in Source's name, declaring this YouTube channel in Source's name, and lots of love from my heart to yours. Hold the power, self-power, right? It's not power over, but self-power, and then hold the vision, and then trust yourselves. You're doing really, really, really great. All right, lots of love, and we'll see you in the next one.